what do employers need to be thinking about if they find out or suspect that some of their employees' work permits are going to be canceled early? This is a really pertinent topic right now when we've got a lot of changes going on to immigration, particularly to the humanitarian side of immigration. A recent example is that the 2023 Biden program called CHNV parole, which was specifically for some Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans who entered in 2023 and 24. The Trump administration tried to stop it. They announced in March they were going to stop it. Recently, earlier in April, a judge blocked it, so now it's stayed. So now we don't know if it's going to stop or not stop sometime in the future. But that's about 500,000 people in the United States who most of whom probably have jobs. Their employers did not sponsor them, so it may not be on the radar of their employer that you have employees that have a work permit in category C11 that are on this parole program that may be getting canceled, and they may have their work permits canceled early. Right now, as of April 24th, they're not getting canceled early. You can go by the date on the EAD. But what if they were? This is a really tricky thing for employers because when you hired them and did their I-9 and ran them through E-Verify, if you use E-Verify, you didn't have to understand or recognize that they were part of this particular parole program or what their status really was. It didn't matter. You may not have retained the records that show you what their status is. And it's not as simple as saying, oh, look, this is a Venezuelan employee. Let me go ahead and preemptively fire them. That's actually still illegal to do that. You can't do a termination based on country of origin because you suspect that now their underlying status is gone. So if we were going to take the most obvious case of all, which let's say your employee comes to you and says, oh, look, here is a notice from USCIS that confirms that my work permit has been canceled. At that point, you need to re-verify that I-9 using some other basis. Because some people, they entered with this parole program and after that they filed asylum, so they qualify on a different basis. Or they married an American and they're going to get an EAD through their adjustment. Some other thing could be going on. So you still can't assume they don't have work authorization. But if they actually proactively bring it to your notice that they don't, that puts the employer in a spot where you can't really justify continuing to employ them. If they don't have legal work authorization, they don't. What if they don't tell you? And most of them are probably not going to. Then it's actually not appropriate to dig around and ask them to make them come in and show you other documents. What an employer can do and should be doing is preparing for this possibility that your employees are going to lose their status and that you could lose their employment all at once or much sooner and more abruptly than you expected. I think it's a good idea for employers to keep track of the status and country of birth of all of their employees who aren't U.S. workers. So I'm talking about everybody who's not a citizen or a green card holder. If you know that they have an EAD, take a note of that code when they show it to you in the beginning. There are dozens of different reasons that people get EADs. They have different rules about extensions and about how long they're issued for. But just knowing the code can give you further understanding into what it means. Now, in this case, with the example we're using, the CHNV parole program being terminated, it would not be enough to say, oh, everybody that has a C11 code EAD now needs to be laid off if it had gone through. No, because there are people from other parole programs that have C11 EADs and their parole programs were not terminated. Even if you were going to say, okay, everybody with a C11 EAD and they're from Cuba or Haiti or Nicaragua or Venezuela. No, that's still not good enough because there are people from those 4 countries that would have parole for some other reason. And then think about also the timing. This program didn't exist until 2023. So anybody whose I-9 is older than 2023, that wouldn't have been the program they're on. So we're kind of getting into this awkward, murky area where you've got to do some guessing and it's messy. I think for now, not knowing any other way, it is safer for employers to be prepared internally, but not go digging for more information from their employees and not preemptively assume that people have lost their work authorization. If you did the I-9, you're solid as an employer to say, I thought they had work authorization until this expiration date. Go ahead and do an I-9 audit internally. Make sure all your I-9s are really done correctly. But if it had an expiration date on there and we haven't reached that date, you're in the clear. All of these parolee work permits are not associated with employers. So even if they're canceled, you're not going to get notice. No one's going to send you a letter about it. It would really be up to the employee probably to notify you, because for the government to know where, so theoretically, yes, they could track these people are paying taxes. They could work with other agencies and figure out where these people are working and tell their employers. I just don't really see that happening. So I think it's much more likely that you're not going to actually know. Nobody's going to inform you until you try to, have them come in to renew their EAD, renew their I-9 when their current EAD expires, and they're not going to have a new one to give you. So if that happens down the line, definitely check in with your immigration attorney. I would expect that we're going to see people who have EADs right now that expire that are not going to be able to replace them. And that's just because the Biden administration was just much more liberal in giving work authorization to people with all kinds of irregular statuses than the Trump administration is. So there are going to be a lot of people that have a work authorization now that they're not actually going to be able to renew. And note that some work authorization categories, as long as they apply on time to renew, if it's still pending, they get an extension. In a lot of cases, that extension is an extra 540 days, because that's the cushion that USCIS gave itself because of how slow they are at adjudicating these very simple and straightforward applications. But in some cases, do not qualify for an extension at all, so they have to have the new card in hand or they can't work. If they have a gap between them, then they have to be either laid off or put on unpaid leave. Those are the options. So as we look at this rollback of work authorization and benefits given to immigrants who are in these gray statuses, there are a couple of things to look out for. So by these gray statuses, I mean people who don't have a green card and they don't have a non-immigrant visa status. So they're not here as visitors or students or any of the different work visas like an H-1B, a TN, an L, and O. Instead, they have some sort of humanitarian status, some kind of special protection. They've got DACA or TPS or a pending asylum case, or they were paroled in for humanitarian reasons. Those people are the most vulnerable right now to loss of their benefits and loss of their ability to keep living in the U.S. And the way that we are seeing this group affected right now compared to in other eras of the United States is that although deportations aren't really up, we're seeing more erratic enforcement. So it used to be that if they're looking for Joe Blow, they'll go to his house and they'll arrest Joe Blow, and they're not going to ask the other family members, hey, what's your status? Now it seems to be much more common that they're going to go ahead and arrest everybody else there too, or at least ask everybody else's status and arrest them if they're not happy with the answer. Going into more sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, churches, courthouses, when people go to do their check-in interviews because they're on some kind of long-term protection from deportation, and every year they're going to go in person. It's kind of like when criminals have parole and they just have to show that they're, not committing new crimes, that meet with their probation officer. It's kind of like that. So people have been getting arrested at those and getting put into removal proceedings. So we are seeing more chaos around the enforcement of immigration laws. We have entire groups of people that have been given protection that has been considered good enough. So if you had DACA or TPS, so DACA is for those dreamers. In the Obama era, there was a special program that was about if you were brought here as a child and you were between a certain age at that time, then you could get this renewable protection. And it didn't mean you can't get deported. It just means the bar's a lot higher. So it was sort of this acknowledgement that if you were brought here as a child, it wasn't even your choice. So you never technically made a decision or had the authority to break the law to enter illegally. They were given protection. They have not been targeted for deportation. I would say those protections are really weakening. And people with DACA and TPS and a pending asylum case are certainly more vulnerable now under the Trump administration than they had been in the Biden administration or even in the first Trump administration. And the other thing that even if you're not getting picked up and put into removal, you could also just experience a loss of benefits because of the government slow walking your benefits. So just not processing your application. I think we're going to see more of that as time goes on, but it's so early right now that I don't think there's the evidence right now to say whether processing times are getting better or worse. I don't think they're going to be getting better because that's just not usually how it works when you're cutting staff. And there is this whole idea of, we shouldn't give these people benefits. It's just, it doesn't seem the way things are going, but we don't have enough information yet to say, oh, they are slow walking work authorization applications or they're not. If you have questions as an employer about how any of this would affect you with your employees who have any kind of one of these gray statuses, it's a great idea to check in with your lawyer. Make sure your lawyer knows what categories you're even talking about, because these would be mostly employees that the company didn't sponsor. So you never paid your lawyer to file something for them. You may not have really been involved with their immigration. They may have really handled it on their own. So your lawyer may not really be aware that they exist at your company and that you're worried about this. So definitely bring it to their attention.